All right. Well, hey, welcome. Thanks for tuning in on this video. We wanted to shoot this, and I'm joined with Rob and Ryan, and we wanted to talk about some of the logistics and kind of like, especially attached to finances in regard to like if you're considering doing a church out of your home, or maybe just leading a church that might be a little bit different than some of your experience in the church, and maybe a more traditional church. And so we wanted to walk through a little bit of our some of our experience with that, some of the things that we've learned. But wanted to start though with, as we're praying before this call, just really wanting to make sure we center in on Jesus and his heart for this. It's really easy in the church to allow things to become too much about money, or not enough about money in a sense, right? We are just talking about how Jesus, in some respects, he cared very deeply about money. He taught on it a lot. He had a lot of strong things to say about greed, about people's heart posture towards money. It was a very important topic to him. And at the same time, he put Judas in charge of like the finances. And I don't know, that's always kind of said something significant to me about Jesus, where it seems like the working out the logistics and the management of money didn't seem to be it wasn't that it wasn't a priority at all, but it didn't seem to be the highest of priorities to him. And at the same time, he taught so much about it. He really feels like this is super important, especially in regard to people's hearts, right? Like that he's wanting people, Rob had just brought up the parable of the shrewd manager in Luke 16, where you have Jesus telling this story about a guy who's doing some shady stuff as a manager, and he's kind of getting one over on his boss, and then he's commended for being this shrewd manager, and it's a little bit confusing, but in the end, Jesus is pointing out, and the point of it is he is calling us to be faithful with what we've been given in regard to wealth in this life, and that there is a measure in which we are being evaluated on how we use our money, and then it is somehow connected to what we're going to be trusted with in the next life. So this is a really important topic for ourselves. I don't know, Rob, if you'd want to add anything else on what you're reading there.
Yeah, it seems like with the money piece, we tend to kind of steer away from it because so much bad stigma around it with prosperity gospel and things like that. And especially us in house churches, we don't really need the money because we're not paying a budget or a salary. Our pastors are all bivocational, so we don't think much about the money. But I think you're right. Jesus was always teaching about it, and it was at the forefront, but it wasn't the thing that drove him. I think that was a great observation on your part. I mean, it's not like he didn't know Judas was going to betray him and was kind of taking money out of the treasury. He knew. And so the scripture that comes to mind is like those who put their trust in money, like it makes wings for itself and it flies away. It's gone. But we're supposed to use it while we're here for kingdom advancement. And Jesus is all about the kingdom, all about kingdom moves. So I think when we think about we are church is starting and non-paying pastors and all that stuff, people really thought it was just about not paying people and just being really cheap with money, and being bivocational because it's a buzzword. But it wasn't. It was to force discipleship. It was to say, since we're not going to hire somebody from, seminary and pay them 100 grand a year, this is going to make us double down on discipleship and raise up leaders from within. So my story is probably one of the best stories I could use because I know it best. I came straight out of prison, had no church experience, and these guys just started investing in me from the gate and saying, calling out leadership in me and raising me up and training me. So I'm still not paid by We Are Church, and I've been here for 10 years, and it's been amazing. I work for Crazy Love Ministries, but so it's not bad to be paid as a pastor, but they were thinking, how can we make disciples? How can we obey Jesus? So I don't know if that helps, Sean, but thing came to mind.
Yep. Yeah. And I'm thinking too, like, and maybe Ryan, you could speak a little bit to this. I think a lot of people, and I think of the three of us, you probably have the most experience in this area where with all your church background, there can be a lot of people that we meet who have been in leadership in various churches. They've seen some just ugly fights, weird stuff around money, and then it's kind of like part of the maybe desire in starting a house church or a small simple church is like, okay, we just can get away from all the money stuff. And there is an aspect where I think I think a good aspect to that, right? Where it's like we don't want the church to be driven by money, and we've seen some of that in the church, so we want to go over here and do something different. But it may not be as simple as, well, so I'm just going to make disciples and we don't need to think about money at all, because then there is like some, I don't know, how have you wrestled through that?
Yeah, it's a ditch on both sides, right? Like it's a vacuum. You can swing and assume that okay, I'm going to go to seminary, and as Rob said, I'm going to make 100 grand. I'm going to be a pastor. It's a predictable income, and right, we can all see relationships get strained. There's weird things that infiltrate that are in your heart, maybe consciously or subconsciously, that money, yeah, right, it pays my bills. It's the livelihood, right? It becomes a thing that I don't know how true my integrity is with it. And so a reaction would be, okay, well then let's not do anything with money. And very clearly the Lord tells us to be good stewards, much is given, much is required, kind of thing. I think my life verse, my parents raised me when a little kid, like 4 or 5 year old, they like set me down like, okay, you gotta have a life verse. Rob just referenced one of them, but another one is some trust in chariots and horses. As for me, I will trust in the name of the Lord my God. And anything that produces some type of dependence upon something other than the Lord is the thing that we're supposed to react to, right? We're supposed to react to. But I'm supposed to eat. I'm supposed to drink. I'm supposed to, there's wealth that sustaining, right? Like there's things, and so how do we navigate God-given gifts in our life? And so, yeah, some of my experiences, we have all the gross things that man does with money in church and the gross stories and all that stuff that I don't want to have anything to do with. But then also, I want to lean into it and be a generous giver and do all the things that Jesus teaches us. And so how do we walk that way? We can't avoid it and we can't reject it. We have to walk down the center line of spirit-filled. Lord, what are you saying? What do you have for me here? And I think some of my practice in the last few years, and you guys have probably seen it too, there's a myriad of the ways that the Lord causes different expressions of the body to handle different things, right? Some are nonprofits in the United States, some are not. Some have bank accounts, some don't, right? And I think that's testament to people operating in conviction and hearing from the Lord.
Yep. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I was thinking too, as you're sharing, we see in the book of Acts, and this is something that we've wrestled through within We Are Church. I remember there was a point where, and I think Rob, it was when all the elders were together, that we were wrestling through at a certain point, like, should we just go towards like people just giving directly to where they want to give, and we can just like get rid of all the bank account stuff and just take all of that off of the plate of leadership. And I think one of the things that we came back to was, gosh, it seems like we see in the book of Acts, like they came and they laid money down at the apostles' feet for distribution, and then you see even in Acts 6 where they were distributing to the widows, and the apostles were realizing that they shouldn't be the ones doing it because they were not doing a great job with it, and so that's where they identified the first deacons. A lot of people would see that as to help facilitate that, right? So you can see from the very beginning with the early church that there was still like people giving into the church, and then a distribution of funds through like wisdom and discernment of leadership. And so that's where we felt, and maybe Rob, you could say a little bit more, like we felt like there is still something very valuable, and I don't know if it's mandated like it has to, but biblical though, like precedent for people giving into the church, and there being some sort of like the leadership helping discern where it goes. So anything you would say on that, and then maybe what that's looked like as you've seen like how We Are Churches handled over the years.
Right. Yeah, I think you'll find arguments for both sides. People saying you have to give to the local church, and people saying, well, you as long as you're giving, it doesn't really matter. And I think both are right. I think there is something there. I can't say it's a mandate from scripture, but the way we've looked at it is it's like what Ryan quoted right now, where you put your trust, and one of the biggest temptations is to trust in money, like because it brings comfort, because it brings security, because it brings things that makes life easier. So where people put their money at, that's, after that parable where, you can't serve two masters, you'll love one or the other. I think that's where you'll really find out if you trust the leadership that God put you under. If you trust your resources to them. And I know even that makes people cringe. Like, I love the church, but I ain't giving them my money because they ain't going to use it right. Well, that's just not trusting the stewardship of the leaders that God put there in authorities. So we like to think of it as like a family. So when we give to the church here, our local house church, we make decisions together where we're going to give to. It's not just up to the pastor. So we're asking everybody in the little house church to find missionaries, find people in need in our community. The money is supposed to be 100% used for local or global mission. That means it can all go out. None of it's supposed to be used for buildings or salaries, but sometimes people struggle giving, they just feel like I'd rather give to somewhere I know it's used better. And we'd say, well, we want to give together as a family. So if you want to give to compassion or some other thing, then let's all give to that from the church. Let's do it together as a family. And I think it does create a little bit more trust, but not always, and something you said earlier, Sean, about the pastors and stuff like that. We've learned that each house church needs to have a treasurer and not just like a bookkeeper. We're learning this right now, that each house church for us has a treasurer since the beginning, but it's not just a bookkeeper. It's somebody that actually has a conviction around giving and generosity and sharing report of where the money went these last quarter or whatever it is. We're learning that. Before we just had people that would manage the books and they were the treasurers, but now we're saying, no, there's actually people that are gifted and want to celebrate generosity and want to encourage generosity. Because what's happened with us in the past is we've kind of just forgotten about the money because we don't really need it to run the church. And then it just accumulates, and that's bad stewardship. So I can see why people wouldn't want to give to the local church if they're like, it's not even going out, it's just sitting there. What are we doing with the money? There's no report. So finding the right people, the right gifting, and people that God has given conviction is showing fruit in this season.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, Ryan, anything you would add on? So for those that might not know, Ryan is leading very similar expression of the church in Memphis. Ryan, I guess, things you would add about how you guys have set things up and how it's gone.
Yeah, we're a little different, and it's primarily because of how we started. When we were starting, we were thinking more traditional model, and then as we were launching into that, we adjusted. And so I went to the leadership 6 years ago, and at that point, it was just kind of a team of men. Now we call it our deacons, and we have a lady or two on every now and then. It just depends on giftings like Rob was just speaking of. And I just went to him and said, hey, I don't have any other skill. I've always been paid by the church, but I feel this conviction. What should we do? And they didn't want to hear it. They pushed it away. And so then it was like, okay, Lord, what I feel this conviction. Mine that I'm submitting to are saying they want to keep paying me. What should I do? And then the Lord, as many of you know, the Lord's kind of just crafted a unique story in my heart where it gave me some bivocational things, and we got to drastically reduce the salary that I was taking. And so we get a very minimal income from our church still. So we do have a church budget. We do have a 501c3. I, as Rob said, over season, identified people that absolutely walk in these types of giftings, not a bookkeeper, but someone who holds a conviction. We identified kind of in the Acts 6 passage as our deacons. And so our deacons manage some of that, along with the elders. The elders speak to the ministry that's supposed to take place, which usually takes finances. But the deacons are the ones that really kind of operate and oversee and do the reports and, maintain and have access to the bank accounts like Rob was speaking to and some of that stuff. So we're very similar. What we say is the elders are listening to the Lord and the deacons are priming the pump financially with their giftings and their generosity. So the Lord's told us we're supposed to give to compassion, like Rob just said. And we go to the deacons, okay, and the deacons usually say, hey, what are y'all feeling like? How much should we give? Here's what we can give. And the deacons have some very practical things they can do. That's just one expression. We're in Tennessee. We have a benefit of tax exemption. We have a benefit of registering as a 501c3 and getting some different benefits there. In the United States, we have the benefit, whereas overseas, there's different benefits and stuff. In each state, there's different benefits. But it all comes down to like, what's the Lord saying? What's the Lord playing out? And that's kind of what we've found is operating in the best conviction with the most integrity possible for us. So
yeah, that's good. Yeah. So now I want to think about like this, a lot of people out there that, they're starting something. Maybe there's 8 people gathering in their home. They're trying to figure out finances at this point. Like from either of you, I mean, I guess maybe starting with Ryan, what would be your, I guess, what would you do now that what you've learned and going through it? Would you do a 501c3 again? And maybe how long or difficult of a process is that? Or would you tend to think, maybe I would not go with that, and why?
Yeah, you kind of answered my question or my answer. You gave my answer. I think we probably would not do it again because of the effort it took. However, I'm 50-50. The Lord very clearly told us we were supposed to do that 6 years ago, and we just continue to operate in it, and we brush it off every few months. Hey, are we supposed to just kind of let this go? Should we adjust this? We kind of check in with the Lord, and so far we've not heard anything.
What could somebody expect as far as when you say it's difficult?
Yeah. So it depends on the state. It depends on the state. But here in Tennessee, we had to create a charter and bylaws, like how we're going to operate with the finances, who's going to control what, if you fold, what happens, all of that stuff has to be written before you can get a bank account and do some of those things as far as a 501c3 is concerned. And so, yeah, it takes a lawyer to write some of that up. There are some great organizations out there that like help churches start, and they even help house churches start as far as getting bylaws and stuff. It's a little different state to state. That would be probably the first step, is to research each state, each country. Some of our friends overseas have very different laws as well. But if the Lord's giving conviction to operate as a 501c3, as a nonprofit organization, almost all 50 states require a bylaws of some sort where you have to write, this is definition of terms, like what is an elder, what is a deacon. You have to write all of that stuff out in a legal document, and then annually report, very minimal, but a little bit of reporting to the government. This is the benefit of the United States. The separation of church and state is we don't have to report a lot. We just basically have to report a little bit. And for us, the best way to report is to create a third party that holds some of our finances for us. It's like an automatic audit. And we have a document that we share sometimes with people that gives some of those details on how to receive giving online and some of those types of things, and it helps expedite that. But yeah, it is a good little bit of startup work to get started, depending on the state.
I think there's like an organization, I probably got the name wrong, but like Start Church or something.
Yeah.
There's like stuff like that can really help. But yeah, there I know there's a cost to it. Rob, I'm curious from you, if somebody were to ask you, and I think you've been asked this, like, hey, what do you think? Like, do you have a thought as far as like 501c3 or not? I don't know. Do you have?
Yeah, I think it's right back where we started, is asking Jesus, what does he want you to do? Because if you're in a very wealthy area like Silicon Valley where people make a lot of money and their offerings are going to be huge, you're probably going to want to do it a little bit different. The Lord's probably has a specific assignment. If you're working in Africa where people are bringing like a chicken or something, I don't know, you're probably going to do it a little different. But I just imagine there's something beautiful about simplicity and modeling for children as well. I'm in Silicon Valley here, so just about all of our offerings, what people are giving to the church is done electronically. I think there's something lost in that. I would love to see a time where we gather together and people actually bring their offering in prayer together and in love, and the kids are seeing it and they're asking, why are you putting money? Well, that's going to go to the poor. That's going to go to, there's just something lost in the electronic and the digital, the way we do things, that it's not that it's less spiritual. I'm not saying that, but I think there's something beautiful about simplicity and not letting that bank account grow to, but I'm thinking more simple gatherings, you got 10 people, 8 people in a room, you're praying, you're worshiping. Hey, we're going to take an offering for the Lord. And this is going to go to Matthew 25. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. That's what this is about. It's unto Jesus. And we're going to use it for that. I would long to see that, and I know it's happening all over the world, but I guess contextually, you have to ask the Lord, what do you want to do here? How do you want to do it here? And just staying close to Jesus in this, making it not about the money, but about Jesus.
That's good. Yeah, maybe last thing I think is Ryan. So let's say somebody feels like, gosh, I think we're supposed to just keep it simpler, either just through desire to keep it like for simplicity's sake, or like, hey, we want to stay a little bit more under the radar in regard to like where things might head in our society. So we don't want to do the 501c3 thing. What I guess advice do you give on starting a church that does not have the 501c3?
Yeah, this is everything that I was taught in Church Intensive, and that you guys have teach is character, matters of the heart are the thing. And so how can we give with integrity? How can we manage appropriately? Jesus sets up 12 and does assign Judas to make sure he's managing the bag, right? Like that's what he does practically. So there is some type of, hey, someone's going to have to help us with this. Someone's going to have to manage this. And there's a couple different organizations. National Christian Fund is primarily a way to give, not necessarily a bank account or anything like that. But we do know of a few churches, house churches in particular, that have set up a church with a personal account, but everybody can have it and they can give to this one spot, and then that account can only give to nonprofits that they've all selected.
It's National Christian Foundation, right?
Foundation. Yeah, I'm sorry, I said fund. Yeah, foundation. Thank you. National Christian Foundation. Yeah, and then the other little hurdle that's a little bit of a hiccup if you don't do a 501c3 is getting a bank account. So like, let's say Rob, Sean, and I were supposed to start a house church, and we felt the conviction of the Lord not to do a 501c3. The bank account that people potentially would give to, or how we would give, would have to be in one of our personal names, right? Just accounting wise. So, how do we make sure that we stay above reproach?
And that's where NCF provides an option where, it seems like, if I understand it right, you could set up an account with them where people give to that account, and then you kind of have, where you can direct funds out of that account, right?
Yes, but it would be a Sean Breaky account still.
Oh, I
It
see.
would still be a Sean, like you have someone's social security in the United States is going to be attached to the bank account or to National Christian Foundation or one of those things. That's just practically how it works.
Yeah.
Some of the organizations. And there's nothing wrong, right? Like it's one of those neutral things. It's just what the Lord has said. And how do you maintain integrity? How do you maintain all those things? I think the big thing that we're all saying is we don't assume anything here, right? Like we don't assume the Lord wants you to do A, B, and C. I think we have scripture and we have his voice to give us guidance of, oh, are we supposed to do a 501c3? Well, let's ask the Lord. Let's spend some time praying and asking the Lord that. Oh, we're not. And in the state of California is different than Tennessee. You can be a church without being a 501c3 in the state of California. In the state of Tennessee, you can't. And so like y'all can be licensed and go get a church bank account without being a 501c3. That doesn't happen here. And there's some variances, and as we all know, the tax laws change all the time and things adjust. So I do think it is important to do some good management to figure out, okay, Lord, what are you saying? And then what does that mean for us? What are we supposed to do? And how do we hold the utmost integrity? And like we said, there's lots of different resources, from ways to start bylaws, ways to give without having a 501c3, third party, all of the different things, management, like a bookkeeping kind of management thing. There's lots of different resources today to help us with that. So,
yeah, that's cool. That's helpful. Yeah. So, I mean, for those that are watching this, that are in the fellowship, feel free to, hit people up and ask questions. If you got some, reach out to people. We don't need to just try to do this on our own. You can even reach out to Ryan on there within that space. But yeah, hopefully we hit some things that will be helpful. There's a lot more, but we're still in process. We're still learning. We don't have it super fine tuned, but we're growing along the way. And I think it's important to remember that we're not professionals, and the goal is not like, hey, and I don't know, that's sometimes some of what we can carry, right? Where it's like, we feel like we have to have all these answers. And even I've seen where sometimes it's funny, because we can even be thinking about all of this stuff before we're like actually making disciples, right? Where it's like, we kind of figure out all the logistics around church, and it's like, all right, we've got it all together now. Like, we just need to find some people. And it's like, that seems out of order, right? Like, hopefully these things kind of are questions that need to be answered along the way of, but, also just remember, like, the goal is not to then become super professional and polished and all this. Like, and I think that's part of pointing out how things were even messy with Jesus and the disciples, right? Where it wasn't super polished and clean, but this group of people where the finances were a little bit out of order, they changed the world. And it wasn't because they had all the polish. It's because it's the power of the Spirit and his leading. It's Jesus. It's all of that. And so just to keep the main thing, but then also hopefully you can find some support with some of these questions. Okay. Thanks, Rob and Ryan. And yeah, thank you guys for joining in.